Hello, welcome to part 2 of my favourite albums turning 10 years old in 2025. Today I've got 7 more albums for you that came out all the way back in 2015, which is now 10 years ago, apparently. Alright, first up, we've got Just Like You by Fallen in Reverse. Now, I can remember this album really being one of my favourite things ever at the time when it came out. I had this one on repeat constantly. Some pretty big and memorable singles on this one as well. Just Like You, the title track, great song, really hilarious music video. God If You Are Above, Chemical Prisoner. Also a bunch of other great songs on this album like Wait and See, Pray, My Apocalypse. I've definitely not gone back to this album much in a good few years now. Obviously the band have become a lot more enormous since the release of this one. Just Like You is definitely a nice album to go back to. If you want to hear some older style Fallen in Reverse before they were arena fillers, I guess. Next up, we've got Automatic by Don Broco. So I used to really not be a fan of this band at all. Wasn't a fan of the voice, wasn't a fan of the sound, any of it. It just wasn't my thing. But it was songs on this album that actually got me into them and made me really, especially with this album, fall in love with their music. I think this is definitely still the best album that Don Broco have put out. Even compared to their much newer stuff, I think this is still the best style for them, and I would love to see them go back to it as well. Automatic, Super Love, Further, Nerve, Money, Power, Fame, Fire, What You Do To Me, and of course, You Wanna Know. Probably still my favourite song by this band. I love this one. I think that the main reason that I wasn't immediately drawn to this band is they're not a metal band, they're not a pop punk band, they're not really in that sort of thing. They're more, it's what I like to call feel-good alternative rock music, and that's very much become one of my favourite things in more recent years. So I love going back to this album every time, love listening to this one all the way through. It is thoroughly enjoyable. Next up, we've got Life's Not Out to Get You by Neck Deep. Now, from what I've seen over the years, this album has sort of got a little crown on its head. It is one of the most loved and most popular modern pop punk albums I've ever heard of, seen. And while I can understand it is a great Neck Deep album, it's got some very memorable singles on there. It's certainly not my favourite thing the band have done. I'm actually a massive fan of new Neck Deep. I've really enjoyed the last couple of albums, so going back to this one, it almost feels like a declining quality for me now. There is certainly some very good pop punk songs on this album. Can't Kick Up the Roots, Cali Mar, Gold Steps. One of my favourite songs ever by the band, Serpents. And then obviously the enormous one that everyone knows, even if you've not really heard of Neck Deep, you probably know it, December. And certainly still one of the biggest songs this band have ever released. I think maybe I'm not as connected to this one because I didn't know who Neck Deep were in 2015, or if I did, I didn't really give them much of a chance. I never really got into them that much until a few years later, maybe. Alright, next up, we've got an incredible, yet quite controversial metal album, Ire by Parkway Drive. Now, I think for a lot of Parkway Drive fans back in 2015, this was either the make or break for them. You either continued being a fan of the band, or you didn't after this one. I think for some reason, this album pissed a lot of Parkway Drive fans off and made them think that Parkway Drive had gone a lot softer, even though it clearly wasn't soft music on this album at all. It seems really stupid to me as someone who is quite happy with most things. This album is, in my opinion, a lot more enjoyable than older Parkway Drive stuff, and I don't understand the hate for it at all. You know, songs that especially stand out in this one, Vice Grip, Crushed, and Bottom Feeder. I think these songs are incredible. I've seen them played live a couple of times by the band as well, and it is just such a good time. I think this really is a strong metal album. It definitely elevated Parkway Drive's success even more. It got them even more out there than the last few albums did, and for a good reason. When I listen to any of their music, they've always really sounded one certain way, and yeah, while their newer stuff might not be the kind of heavy you like, they've still maintained a heavy style. They're still a metal band. They're still doing metal music. Let bands evolve, let them do these things, let them change. Bands evolve, some do it better than others. I think Parkway Drive have done it just great. Next up, I've got Malevolence by New Year's Day. Another great female-fronted metal rock band. Ash Costello, great singer. Defame Me, Malevolence, I'm About to Break You, and Kill or Be Killed, probably one of the most known songs by the band still. I think this band is still a fair bit underrated, to be honest. Like, you hear about other bands like Spirit Box, Hailstorm all the time now, but I feel like New Year's Day just never really got that chance to really shoot up there into massive fame like these bands have. But then again, I do think this is the best album the band have put out. Probably the best and most catchy singles the band have put out as well. While their newer stuff is still great, I think it's certainly not as enjoyable as this album was. This album really was something special for the goths. Alright, a couple more. Another great pop punk album came out in 2015 by another one of my favourite pop punk bands. It's Around the World and Back by State Champs. Obviously the biggest, most standout single on this album that every fan of this band knows, Secrets. Also on this album there's All You Are Is History, Perfect Score, Eyes Closed, All or Nothing, Around the World and Back. It's just more of the great pop punk stuff. They're just one of these really, again, feel good pop punk bands that just put me in such a great, positive, energetic mood as well sometimes. I really do enjoy this one. I've got a lot of good things to say about State Champs, to be honest. They're one of the better bands out there. And again, I do think they're a little bit underrated as well. But Secrets has been their biggest, most blow-up song of their whole career. You know, it's the one that they end the shows with. It's the biggest known talked about single. So safe to say this album definitely made an impact because of that song alone. And finally, the last album on this list, another band that were a massive part of my year in 2015. I mean, they still are now. They're still very much part of my life. It's Hate Me by Escape the Fate. I got a lot of good memories of seeing Escape the Fate for the first time live when this album had just come out, hearing some of these songs played live for the first time, meeting the band even. It was a good time. This was one of the highlights of my first download, meeting the band, seeing them play some of these songs for the first time. So sort of linking this band to my first ever download festival as well. I did get a really blurry, low quality picture with Craig Mabbitt as well in the Kerrang Signing Centre download that year. Yeah. But not only that, there were also some great standout singles on this album as well. Live for Today, Breaking Me Down, Remember Every Scar, Just a Memory, Alive, and Hate Me, the title track as well. They're just one of those good time rock and roll, emo, metal type bands really, aren't they? They're not really classed as the heaviest thing ever. They never have been. But yeah, they've never really changed their sound too much. So this album is just another safe one really, and it went down well enough, I think. It certainly elevated them a bit more, made them more successful, and again, just another one that I really base on the good time I was having in 2015. Alright, that is it. That is 7, well, technically 14 of my favourite albums that are turning 10 years old in 2025. If you haven't seen part 1 yet, then what are you even doing here? Go and watch part 1 first. Feel free to subscribe if you are brand new here. I make a lot of videos like this, you know, album rankings. I also make festival vlogs, festival videos specifically around Slam Dunk and Download Festival, where I have seen a bunch of these bands that I've talked about already. And if you want to see any of that stuff, you know exactly where to go. So yeah, thanks for watching this two-part video. It's been a nice little way to start out 2025. I've got a good feeling about this year. Doing my usual thing on here, you know, it's all about music. And I'll see you all again real soon for that.